Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me well from here? Great. So I am Marie Gantois. I'm a French civil servant. I work for the city of Paris. I've been working there for 13 years. I'm currently in charge of a team of about 20 people, and we work in urban soil and plant studies and assessments, and in greening strategies for Paris. Today, I'm going to focus the presentation on our zero pesticide strategy, even though it's not the only topic we work on, but I think it's a nice topic to gather public health issues whilst addressing biodiversity enhancement and adaptation to climate change. So, first of all, a little bit of our organization within the city of Paris. So Paris is the capital city of France. It is a big city for France, but a very small city compared to other cities in the world. Paris itself is only 105 square kilometers. Some of the presentations we had yesterday, there are some cities here in Turkey that are 100 times bigger. Yesterday, the city was 11,000 square kilometers. Paris itself is very small, only 105 square kilometers. Paris itself is composed of the inner city and 2 woods outside. So Paris is about 2.2 million inhabitants. Now, if you consider Paris plus its suburb areas, all in all, it's over 12 million inhabitants, so it's a bit bigger. But I think it's important for you to know that working for the city of Paris, we only work for this little area of only 100 square kilometers and 2.2 million inhabitants. So in Paris, we are over 50,000 civil servants. We are all managed by the General Secretary, and we have 22 different departments. One of which is green spaces and environment, where I work. So in green spaces and environment, we are at the moment 3,200 staff working there. So it includes people such as gardeners working in our parks. We also have landscape planners designing new parks. We also have people taking care of our trees. So our woods and our trees in the streets and in parks are all planted and managed and watered by the city itself with our own staff. We also have people working in cemeteries, and we have plant production facilities. So we have our own horticultural center that produces 80% of the plants that we plant in Paris, including flowers and shrubs and trees. We produce it all. Almost all of it ourselves in Paris. And so in the green space environment, there's also people such as myself and my team who support all of our colleagues, all the gardeners, all the people taking care of the trees, in order to improve our practices, so better sustainable practices such as zero pesticide strategy, which I'm going to talk about. Just a little bit more figures about greenery in Paris. So in Paris itself, we have over 500 gardens. So some of them are very, very small gardens, and some of them are very big parks that you might have heard of or even know, such as Butte Chaumont or Tuileries or Champ de Mars. And so we have very big parks and much smaller parks. We have 20 cemeteries, we have 2 large woods. All in all our greenery, all the green parks and woods represents a surface of about 3,000 hectares. We have an overall figure of 600,000 trees in Paris. So if we compare it to what we've had yesterday of some municipalities planted over 1 million trees, well, that's something that we cannot compare to. Our territory is much smaller, and 6,000 trees is already a lot for Paris. Of those trees, the vast majority is managed by the city of Paris itself. So 500,000 trees are managed by the city in the woods, in the parks, in the trees, in the streets. About 100,000 of those trees are managed by state-owned companies or other private individuals. We also have a botanical garden with very nice sites and green roofs, and a good policy on urban agriculture that's been developing for quite some years now in Paris. So we have what we can have as greenery in Paris, because Paris is one of the densest cities in the world. It's very densely built. Some Japanese cities are more dense than Paris, but apart from that, Paris is very densely built. So we do have for our territory very ambitious greening goals. For example, we have a target to have 100 hectares of neighborhood green space. So I showed you a picture here of what it looks like before and then after. So basically, we do have something like 500 schools in Paris. And so in some of the streets where there is a school, more and more what we do is we close the car circulation. We make it only accessible for pedestrians and bikes. And then we green the middle of the street. And that's what we call the school streets, the green school streets. And we do that more and more. And the objective is to put less space for cars and more space for green in the city, because we don't have the space to build more parks. We can't go outside of our borders, so we put the green where we can put it. We also have the target of 30 new hectares of new gardens, which for us is a very big target, and so we are also building those new parks. And yes, our big target for trees is 170,000 new trees planted by 2026, including urban forests. So urban forests is a new topic for us. We are actually planting our first real urban forest that I've shown here on the picture, Place de la Catalogne. This winter, actually, the trees are arriving, and in the next few weeks, the trees are going to be planted. That used to be a roundabout, very mineral, very urbanized, a very typical street and city point of view, and from next year is going to be the start of a new urban forest. So that's what we're trying to do in Paris in terms of greening the city. We also have transformed some streets. For example, here in Boulevard Pasteur, we change our design, and so we bring more green into the city. And because we have a zero pesticides strategy, well, the look is also different than what it used to look like before. And that's the street I was telling you about, the difference between before and after, about trying to put more green into the city. Now, before I come back to what we do for zero pesticide strategy in Paris, I wanted to come back on the national context, because it's very important for us. First of all, some definitions. I'm not sure if you have that difference in your own language or even in English. In France, it's all very set, all very defined, all very precise. So we can use the term pesticides, but we also have phytosanitary products or plant protection products. So in my presentation, I will sometimes use the word pesticide, but I really mean phytosanitary products, so products to protect plants against disease, herbicides that kill weeds. In France, though, if you use the term pesticides, you can also refer to biocides. That includes hydroalcoholic lotions to clean your hands, kills virus and everything. So all that is considered pesticide in French. So that's why we're very cautious in French when we talk to not use the word pesticide, but phytosanitary product. Anyway, just to be clearer and easier, I will still use pesticide in English today. So about plant protection product, pesticide, there are different types of products. There are the chemical ones that most of you, I think, know. For example, glyphosate, the Roundup one, which is a very well-known herbicide. And there's non-chemical products. So there's biocontrol solutions, there's organic certified or compatible products, and there's low-risk plant protection products. So all these are in a part of pesticide that is still okay to use in France, but the chemical products are getting less and less used. Now, apart from plant protection products, we have other solutions that we do use in Paris. For example, microorganisms. A very common example is when you use ladybird larvae to kill aphids. Well, we do that at a big scale, especially in our greenhouses, the plant production system, and also our conservation greenhouses in our botanical gardens. In order to not use any chemical products, we use a lot of those insects and microorganisms to help us fight disease and pests. And there's also basic substances. I don't know if you've heard of them. That's also very all regulated. It's also part of the European Union regulation. So basic substances are substances that are used commonly not for plants, but that can be useful for plants. For example, you can use milk against mildew, which is a kind of disease on plants. You can use vinegar as a disinfecting substance for tools. And so that was not made for disinfection purposes, but we can still use it. And that's what we do as well. In order to prevent using some chemical products, we do use a lot of basic substances. So sorry about all the text in that slide. It's not very friendly and not very nice to read. Just to sum up, what happened is that in France, even in Europe, in 2009, there was a first framework directive on the use of pesticide that then got transferred into the French regulation in 2011 with some specific actions. Now, what's really important for us, that still applies to us and to Paris, but also all the cities in France, is the Label law that happened in 2014, so almost 10 years ago. The Label law gave some targets of restrictions for pesticide use at the states, for local authorities, so local governments, and public bodies. So since 2017, in all cities in France, we're actually not allowed to use chemical pesticides. We are allowed to use all the previous ones that I told you about, so the non-chemical ones, the low-risk ones, the ones compatible with organic agriculture, but we are not allowed in France to use chemical phytosanitary products anymore at the city level. And the newest thing is that since last year, 2022, this also applies to the citizens. So it's not possible anymore for anyone to go in a shop and buy some glyphosate in France anymore. You're not allowed to do that for your private garden. So that's something that's extremely strong, and that's really important for us in France. The Label law is extremely important and triggers a lot of change in behaviors and practices. That being said, in Paris, we started to be pesticide-free before the Label law even existed. So how it started, let me tell you. So our objective, initially, by going pesticide-free in Paris, it was to set a strong, environmentally friendly approach. We wanted also to anticipate national regulation, and we wanted to work towards a total zero pesticide, so chemical and non-chemical pesticide as well. So it is very ambitious, what we did, and it's been implemented for years and years and years and even decades. We started actually in the 1990s. For example, in 1995, we banned one herbicide that was used in corn production called atrazine. Don't know if you've heard of that one. It's a very, very bad chemical, very, very bad pesticide that you can still find 20 years after it's been banned in the water tables. So we banned that in Paris before it was banned at the national level. And we've always had that as a capital city of France, trying to be front runner in terms of environmental practices, try to do better than even the national rules so that we could also trigger new regulations. And so that's what we did for zero pesticides. So some more pictures about what we do. So I told you about the macroorganisms earlier. So that's what we do. That's what we still do in our greenhouses. So we use ladybirds. We do use ladybird against aphids. But we also use other types of insects. For example, lacewing that eats aphids, but also cochineals and thrips. And so we have all these insects coming in every 2 weeks to help us manage our pests, especially in our greenhouses. We've done that outside as well. We've done it in our tree nurseries, for example, outside. But it's been working for some years now, and we don't have to do it anymore. Outside is just a whole natural ecosystem, and we don't have to do more insects anymore. But in the greenhouses, it's different because it's a closed environment, so we need to keep on bringing new insects to help us protect our plants. That is an interesting example of what happened in our cemeteries. So in France, traditionally the cemeteries are very, very mineral. It's all about stone and not much at all about plants. And so we had to have a very huge cultural shift in order to accept, and for the people who were visiting the cemeteries to accept the fact that it was getting greener. The fact that we did not use any more weed killers implied, obviously, that it was getting greener because we were not fighting the weeds anymore. We were just letting the weed install itself and just let it green the surfaces. So that's something that's happened also, and that's the most recent change we've had, because the cemeteries were the last thing to happen in 2015, so almost 10 years ago now. So from the years 2000, we've started as well to use a different management in our parks, what we called differentiated management. I don't know if you have that in English or in your own countries. Basically what we do is that we decide of some areas in the park that need to be still maintained and look very neat, French garden type, very, very lone and everything very perfect. And some other areas of the park that are just left to grow. And we call this biodiversity sanctuaries. And so we don't use any product. The fact is, we did not hire more people to weed and to work in our parks when we stopped using pesticides. So what we decided to do is that some areas of our park we were not managing as much as we used to do before, and that's how we managed to change our practices. So yes, that's an important change in garden and park management. So the fact that we do not use herbicides and we let the weeds grow, it also means that we don't need to use as much insecticides, because we have so much grass where we have natural predators that can kill the other pests that are bad for our plants. So it's all a win-win situation. We also have very big master plans for a city. So we have climate action plan. I'm talking here about our Paris biodiversity master plan. So we've had one in 2012. It's been updated in 2018. And at the moment, it's currently being updated again for next year. We're going to have a new biodiversity plan. And so since 2012, there were already actions about improving biodiversity in our green park management, using less pesticides, and generalize the zero pesticide approach and promote eco-friendly green spaces management over the whole Parisian territory. So that's something that's really approved at the whole city level, because these kind of master plans have to be adopted by the whole policymakers at the city scale during city councils. more illustrations about our new practices in terms of zero phyto management. So we use a lot of mulching, a lot of things we put at the foot of the plants so that we don't have to weed anymore. The fact is, when we use mulch, it also prevents evaporation from the soil, so we don't need to water as much, so it's also a win-win situation. We've collected Christmas trees from the Parisian after the Christmas operation, and so we grind it to reuse it as a mulching solution. And we've studied this for over 20 years of time. We were quite suspicious about the benefits of putting Christmas trees at the foot of our plants, and actually it does work, and actually it is quite interesting. As long as you don't only use that, you need to change from time to time. Some years you put Christmas trees, some other years you put other things. And as long as you do that, you're fine. We also use a lot of ground covers at the foot of our trees. So the idea is that we plant plants that will spread so that they take place of weeds, and so we don't have to weed anymore. We use green cobblestones more and more as well as a greening solution. So for weed management solutions, we have used some hand tools. In our plant production facility, we have mechanical weeding machines that are very effective. We have tried thermal weeding, but it was completely inconclusive for us. It was not efficient. It was using too much energy. And the fact is, we've decided to let it grow. And by letting it grow, after a while, you just don't have to weed anymore. You just have to cut it once or twice a year, and that's all fine. Some other focus, this time on our cemeteries. Our cemeteries were the last one to grow completely pesticide-free, and it was the most difficult thing to do for us, because people are really expecting to see a place for resting. It's really a cultural thing in France. So what we did is that we started to put some exhibitions about how not weeding anymore, how not using pesticide anymore was improving biodiversity. And so we've taken pictures of all those birds, all those insects that could finally thrive and develop in our parks, in our cemeteries, and we put them as an exhibition. And people were so interested, and so we gained public trust thanks to that. That was one of the actions that was really interesting for us. We also have other types of greening projects involving more the communities. So we have, for example, the Green Fingers scheme for community gardens. So we have over 150 community gardens in Paris. And so all the community gardens have to sign a charter we call the Green Hand, Main Verte Charter, in which they engage themselves not to use any chemical pesticide products. So we have an action thanks to that as well on places that we don't manage ourselves. We also have greening permits, so people living or having a business in Paris and wanting to have more green at the foot of the trees in their street are allowed to ask for a greening license, a greening permit that the city will give them. And then they are allowed to maintain themselves, to plant themselves, and to green the city for themselves, as long as they don't use some invasive species and as long as they don't use pesticide products. So we still have some challenges. We've been doing it for decades now. There are still some things that we are still not sure about and that still need our attention. For example, everything about invasive species. In France, we are invaded by the Japanese knotweed, and so this plant just spreads and spreads everywhere. So we've tried really different types of management, not using any chemical herbicide. And so we've tried many different things, and that's part of my team and the support we provide to our colleagues in Paris to do some protocols and follow them in time and see what's effective and what's not effective. At the moment, for knotweed, the most effective thing is to actually cut it a few times a year, but we can never get rid of it. So as soon as we see it, we try to manage it. We have other challenges, for now not justifying the use of pesticides. For example, we have processionary caterpillars on our pine trees and also on our oak trees. So what we do, I've given you an example here, is we put some traps in order to get all the caterpillars, and then they go to burn somewhere. But so that uses plastic, but that does not use chemical products. So it's better for the environment as well, because if you use pesticide for caterpillars, then you kill those harmful caterpillars, but you also kill a lot of other caterpillars. That is good for the environment. So that's some type of actions that we do. Now we do have an emerging challenge on our plane trees. The plane trees are trees that grow very well in an urban environment, a very densely built environment. It's a very tall tree, very beautiful tree. However, it's extremely, extremely sensitive to a new disease for us that's called canker. And so canker on plane trees, if it attains a tree, then it can kill it in 2 years. And because more than a third of our trees in Paris are plane trees, we're extremely vulnerable to that disease. The fact is, this disease is known at the European level as a very extremely important disease, and it's called a quarantine organism. So in that case, even with our French labello, we would be allowed to use some pesticide products. So that's a really strong exception to the rule of not using pesticide products. If we were having this disease, and if there were any product that was working, we would be allowed to use it for this kind of challenge. So that's it for my presentation. I just want to conclude by saying that not using pesticides is important for us to improve biodiversity in our parks. We use it as a way to promote and enhance biodiversity, but it's also good for the environment, and the fact that it's good for health was also a big trigger that helped us advance in there. So thank you very much.